Hello, this is Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis over here in Austin, Texas. It's towards the end of January, and a bunch of my catasetums are waking up. So I need to repot them. For my conditions, I really like the PET method. In fact, the first video that I made for YouTube was talking about how to do the PET method and pot your catasetums using that particular method. So I figured, I might as well make another video that's very similar. I've got some smaller plants. The plant that I potted last year was very large, but essentially the techniques are going to be the same. So I'm just going to kind of run through it real quick and show you how I do it. Yeah, let's get started. So first of all, I have this Catasetum calcasieu. It's an awarded clone. It's rare earth orchids. I got this from Stephen Moffat in Houston this August, so it's a division from his award plant that got an HCC. It's really one of the coolest hybrids I've seen in a long time. I absolutely fell in love with it, and when I saw that Stephen was selling it at the Houston workshop this summer, I had to buy it, and it was a great price. But Stephen uses, he lives in Houston. Houston is a big giant swamp, so it's very hot, very humid. He grows his orchids a little differently than I do here in Austin, which is a little drier and hotter. But his plants are absolutely amazing. So I'm going to repot this into the PET method. A few weeks ago, I dropped this, and so it kind of broke off. Sorry if you see my cat. This is Dallas. He comes and helps me every now and then. Go on, kitty. But this, as you can see, so this was big bulb, and the new growth came off of it. And when I dropped the pot, here, I'm just going to pull this whole thing out. When I dropped the pot the other day, the new growth snapped off the old growth. So I'm down to one bulb, which is not bad. I sell one bulb divisions. Stephen Moffat sells one bulb divisions. This particular group is just fine that way. Pulling it out here. So I have this guy. This bulb is a little smaller. I would prefer it if it was still attached. So you can see the size of this old bulb. The old bulb was shriveling. Again, I've mentioned this in other videos on catasetums. This sort of orangey color just means that it's a back bulb that's being absorbed. So as this one was going through dormancy, the nutrients that are stored in here were being transferred to here. So that's what that orange color is. It's frustrating that all these nutrients are now no longer able to support this because of my clumsiness. Oh well. So I am going to pot this in the PET method. So first of all, I'm going to look at this. So here's the new growth. I really hope that's a new growth and not a spike. If it's a spike, I'll cut it off. It's just long and thin, and it makes me kind of nervous that it's a spike rather than a growth. I hope it's growth. Anyway, I'm going to pot it up the same. So, PET method often involves the use of clear plastic bottles. So, in an effort to streamline this video, I cut it in half already, or not in half, but you can see I cut the top portion of this off, and I'm left with this. Now what? Well, I have a handy-dandy electric soldering iron, and this is amazing for poking holes in plastic. So I'm going to use this for 3 different things. Poking holes in the top here. I'm going to make 3 so I can put wire in to hang it. And as you can see, I didn't do a great job. It's not very straight. It doesn't really matter. So you can see the smoke coming off. It's stinky. Don't do this in a closed place. my greenhouse doors are open. And so now we want to make the water well. Let's get it about that deep. I like to make 2 holes. You know, it's an inch or so off the bottom, give or take a bit. It's not science. This is art, so it doesn't have to be exact. So that's 2 things that I use this soldering iron for. The third, as you can see, I'm not great at cutting this and not sort of creating these nubs. So I like to take this and just kind of run it along here and smooth out some of these nubs. These nubs are a little excessive even for myself, and I apologize. It stinks. But, you know, doing this on top here, it also melts a little bit, so it makes it a little stronger. So there's a couple of reasons that I like to do this. It's probably not critical. It's just something that I prefer. And as I'm doing this, my cat is sitting in my lap here. Probably can't see him. Further complicating this video. Alright, taking this, it's very hot. It'll stay hot until I unplug it, and then it actually cools down pretty quickly. But you can get these online or in a store. It's like 10 bucks. And it's really easy. It's really useful, especially if you're going to be poking holes in pots a lot. Alright, so our pot is now ready to go. So the bottom layer is just, it's just something that doesn't decompose. You know, whatever you have on hand probably works. I have a box of EpiWeb. And when I say box, I mean, it's huge. I got from Ray Barkalow a couple of years ago. He was liquidating his inventory and said, hey, whoever wants this, for the price of shipping, it's yours. So I snapped it up. And I'm glad I did, because I think these little chunks of plastic that are intended to sort of to act like osmunda fiber are really handy in a lot of potting that I do, whether it's for using the PET method or whether it's the Cattleyas that are behind me. In any case, an inorganic layer on the bottom, it will sit in your water well and it won't rot away. So I use EpiWeb. I suspect that the overwhelming majority of you out there do not have EpiWeb. Rocks work really well. Ideally, if you're going to use rocks, you don't want to use ones that aren't really going to leach a whole lot of stuff or minerals into the water. So I live here in Austin. Everything's limestone. Limestone as far as the eye can see in terms of geology. I probably wouldn't use that. It's going to make your water really hard as it sits in the bottom here. You know, styrofoam peanuts, the ones that don't melt, would probably work pretty well. And so I like to get it, you know, so the water level will be here. That's kind of my goal. That's what I'm trying to fill in, the spaces, so that I have sort of a stable layer on the bottom that's going to be submerged for 6 months. The next layer is orchiata bark, large grade. Get a few less here in my hand. Large grade orchiata bark. I like orchiata a lot. It works really well with my orchids. I know there are some pluses and minuses. In my conditions, I find more pluses than minuses. So I'm just eyeballing this. There's no measurements involved. So that middle layer is now orchiata. Next, final layer is long fiber sphagnum moss. This is the brand that I love to use. It's really good. It doesn't break down very quickly at all. You know, this will last 2 years. I don't really push it past that, but it wouldn't surprise me if it went a 3rd season. So I'm going to take this and jam it into here a little bit. Now notice I don't wet any of my media. Some people like to take their media and soak it. I've never found that to be useful or necessary. You know, it just seems like an extra step to me that I don't care about. So I don't do it. So we've got a little bit of spag here. So now what I want to do is I want to take this root ball and sort of create a spag ball around it, pop it in here, and then jam a bunch more sphagnum in. So I've got my root ball and a spag ball. As always with potting, you're going to put the growing tip facing the middle and the oldest growth at the back of the pot, if at all possible. And then just start jamming in the sphagnum. And remember, the key to good sphagnum is to jam it in really, really, really tightly. This stuff, it's kind of counterintuitive, but if you just sort of put it in nice and loose, it holds more moisture than if you pack it in. If you pack it in, it's going to last longer, it's going to dry out a little quicker, and it's going to stay fresher longer. That's how I do it. And during the growing season, I will hit these guys with water just about every day. And as I've mentioned in my videos many times before, very, very hot here in Austin. You know, it'd be months on end of temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And my Catasetinaes really love it, and my Cattleyas behind me really love it as well. And that's it. Well, almost. This is the main portion of the PET method. So you can see it's in here. The new growth is facing the middle. And this should last for 2 seasons. So I'll get one growth coming up here, and then the next season it should get pretty close to the edge of this pot. You know, this pot might be a little bigger than it needs to be. I'm not worried about it. This style of method, I have less worries about overpotting because I do water every single day and it stays permanently wet in the bottom. Anyway, that's how I like to do it. And of course, don't forget your tag. Put it in here. Now, there's a really good chance that as you're potting this up, so this particular plant, you know, it's in here pretty well, but even still, it's always good to have a stake and really cinch this down so it doesn't move around in the pot. So I have these bamboo poles. They're very cheap. You can get them online or your local garden store. Sort of snap them at the nodes. I'm going to jam it in here, right next to and behind the oldest growth. Jam it in the bottom. And I'm a huge fan of zip ties. They're hideous, but I'm a function over form kind of a guy, so. this plant's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to wobble. I have, by the way, anytime you're using scissors like this on plants, make sure you blowtorch them clean. If you're going to cut the plant. If you're cutting plastic, it doesn't matter. And finally, take your fertilizer. This is a new one that I'm experimenting with. It's a powder that when you water it, it sort of turns hard and then slowly dissolves in. I'm going to make a video about this sometime later in the year to explain my results, what I did. But Sue Bottom wrote about this in 2017. So I'm going to use this for the first couple months once I start watering in maybe April, probably May, closer to May, depending on how much this single bulb shrivels. And then I'll switch over to my pelleted fertilizer, the time release NutriCoat mixed with calcium and magnesium. So you could use these little bins here and add your fertilizer that's a slow release over time, or you could simply spread the time release up here. I do want to talk a little bit about the media and how high it is in the pot. So for Cycnokes and Catasetinae, their blooms typically come out somewhere on the bulb and grow up. And then they'll typically arch. But for Cloaceas and Cloacetum, those spikes will often grow straight out and then they'll go down. So I've got a Cloacetum here, and you see I've kind of made a mound on top. So as these spikes grew, they'll grow horizontally and then down. So if I had sunk this down a bit, this plant, these spikes would, they'd probably go into the side of the pot and then get stuck or start trying to go down and die. So you need to be thinking about that depending on what type of plant you have. And so here's a Cloacetum with spikes growing horizontally and then down and then falling off the shelf. I've got another one here. You can see the same thing. This spike, which is now pollinated, grew out and down, and this Cloacetum is sort of elevated in the pot a little bit. So just something to think about as you're repotting these guys. If you end up repotting and the plant is sunk down below the rim of your pot, and this is true for if you're growing in sphagnum or in the PET method, you can cut a little notch in the pot as the spike is growing across the medium, and it'll grow out and then down, and then when you repot it next time, just keep it in mind. Another thing you can do is you can use this as a guide. So if your spike, you see it coming out and it's growing horizontally, and you think it's going to dive into your pot, you can take this very carefully and place it underneath the spike to guide the spike across the top of this and up and over the pot. I've done that. I've done both methods very successfully a bunch of times, and they all work. So that's my 2020 PET method repotting video. Hopefully this video plus the one from January 2019 should be enough to get you going and with your PET method and gets you some giant Catasetum bulbs Fred Clarkiara or whatever you happen to be growing. And good luck. See ya.